Right now, a massive geopolitical earthquake is tearing through the Middle East. And frankly, the silence from Washington's political elite is deafening. If you stay blind to this maneuver, you are going to completely misunderstand who actually dictates the global power dynamic for the coming decade. Let's not beat around the bush. We are constantly hearing the Trump administration frame their relationship with Beijing as a strictly economic battle, heavily focused on trade disputes and new tariffs. So, why on earth is China simultaneously deciding to rapidly expand its financial footprint and military strength directly inside the Persian Gulf? Why make this move now in that specific location and in direct partnership with the Iranian regime? The brutal truth is that this trade war narrative is a dangerous illusion, masking a strategy that is far more threatening, deeply entrenched, and significantly harder to dismantle than simply taxing imported computer chips. Look closely at the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the global oil supply travels through that incredibly narrow waterway wedged between Oman and Iran. This isn't just a standard shipping route. It is the central artery of the world's economy. The entity that commands the Strait of Hormuz doesn't merely control crude oil distribution. They command absolute leverage over every single nation dependent on that oil, which effectively translates to holding power over nearly every country on the planet. Washington has acknowledged this harsh reality for 50 years. This is exactly why the U.S. Fifth Fleet operates out of Bahrain. It is precisely why American naval strike groups have continuously patrolled the waters of the Persian Gulf ever since the Carter Doctrine was established in 1980. The entire foundational strategy of post-war America in the Middle East was anchored on one absolute mandate. No rival power can ever be permitted to dominate the Strait of Hormuz. But Beijing just flipped that script, and they did it with chilling silence. They operated with immense patience, outmaneuvering the Trump administration, whose loud boasts about aggressively confronting China completely failed to anticipate or halt this strategic advance. Here are the actual facts on the ground. Beijing's alliance with Tehran is not a sudden development. Back in 2021, the two nations locked in a massive 25-year comprehensive strategic partnership, a staggering agreement potentially worth $400 billion, encompassing military cooperation, energy grids, and infrastructure development. For the last 3 years, this monumental deal progressed quietly and intelligently beneath the radar. While Western attention was totally consumed by the conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine, alongside flare-ups in the South China Sea, Beijing aggressively accelerated their Middle Eastern timeline. Chinese construction conglomerates are currently establishing major port infrastructure along Iran's southern seaboard. Furthermore, Chinese naval forces have actively participated in maritime military drills alongside Russian and Iranian ships right in the Gulf of Oman. Crucially, Chinese capital is flooding directly into Iran's vulnerable energy sector precisely when severe Western sanctions have economically devastated the regime, leaving Tehran desperate and compliant. For the very first time in history, Beijing is perfectly positioned to exploit this desperation and establish a permanent regional foothold. I am not talking about a traditional military base flying a red banner. I am talking about an infrastructure that is infinitely more durable. They are constructing an integrated economic and logistical presence that essentially hands operational management of the Strait of Hormuz over to China. This is where the situation becomes profoundly embarrassing for the U.S., exposing a reality that Washington desperately avoids admitting in public. The Trump team aggressively campaigned on taking a sledgehammer to Chinese influence. They deployed heavy tariffs, initiated technological embargoes, and pushed for economic decoupling using incredibly forceful rhetoric. Yet, while the West obsessed over this loud economic theater, focusing on electric cars, rare metals, and semiconductor chips, Beijing was executing a masterclass on an entirely different geopolitical chessboard. They completely bypassed the traditional trade war. Beijing pivoted to a strategic arena where American influence is significantly weaker, U.S. assets are fewer, and global media attention is virtually non-existent. Just examine Beijing's actions over the past 18 months. They successfully brokered a historic reconciliation between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That specific diplomatic breakthrough should have triggered massive panic inside every intelligence agency in Washington. We witnessed Saudi Arabia and Iran, two fierce adversaries locked in a bitter proxy war for years, literally shaking hands in Beijing. China didn't orchestrate this merely for positive PR. They understood a foundational geopolitical reality. If you can successfully neutralize the explosive Sunni-Shia divide within the Persian Gulf and convince Tehran and Riyadh to communicate diplomatically rather than trying to annihilate each other, you instantaneously demolish the largest barrier preventing Chinese expansion in the region. You effectively transform the entire Gulf, making the massive American military apparatus look less like a necessary security provider and more like an unwanted foreign occupier. Add the chaotic Houthi insurgency in Yemen to this exact same equation. The Houthis, heavily backed by Iran, are relentlessly attacking commercial vessels in the Red Sea, prompting aggressive retaliatory bombings from British and American forces. Yet amidst this chaotic warfare, China remains the only global superpower maintaining active, constructive dialogue with both Saudi Arabia and Iran. They haven't fired a single shot, yet they navigate this crisis with all of their regional allies fully intact. China isn't participating in the war. They have elevated themselves entirely above it. They are systematically positioning themselves as the sole indispensable mediator capable of speaking to all parties, ensuring they are the ultimate power broker for whatever reality emerges next. This is absolutely not a coincidence. It is a meticulously executed, long-term master plan that frankly exposes the severe blind spots of American foreign policy. Let me be crystal clear about what I mean when I state that the Strait of Hormuz is sliding under Chinese authority. I am not implying that Beijing has erected a massive military fortress there, nor am I suggesting that Chinese destroyers are physically forcing ships to halt. The mechanism of control is far more subtle and ultimately significantly more powerful. In today's world, dominating a vital maritime choke point doesn't require primitive gunboats. It demands deep financial integration, unbreakable political alliances, and the authentic underlying capability to choke off supply lines if deemed necessary. Beijing is systematically constructing all three pillars simultaneously. By establishing massive financial obligations with Iran, Beijing secures immense leverage over Tehran's strategic decision-making process. By fostering deep political trust across both sides of the Persian Gulf, China established itself as the sole authority capable of resolving local conflicts. And by constructing vast physical infrastructure along the Iranian shoreline, China effectively embeds a permanent intelligence-gathering apparatus directly into the region. Consequently, they possess genuine systemic control over the operational mechanics of the Strait of Hormuz. This isn't a superficial military flex. It is entrenched systemic dominance that outlives any temporary army deployment. This brings us to the ultimate strategic betrayal I am highlighting today. When the Trump administration initially took power, the unspoken proposition presented to the Gulf monarchies, to Israel, and to the broader Middle East was explicit. The pitch was that a revitalized, aggressive America was returning to forcefully confront Iranian influence. In exchange for this renewed security umbrella, these regional partners were expected to firmly align with Washington against Beijing. That was the fundamental offer, and initially certain Gulf nations seemed to embrace it. The Abraham Accords were theoretically designed to serve as the foundational architecture for a massive regional realignment towards American interests, effectively blocking both Iranian aggression and Chinese economic reach. However, Beijing didn't wait around to be contained. They aggressively countered by bypassing Washington and proposing a vastly superior arrangement directly to the Gulf states. Beijing's pitch was revolutionary. We will never force you to choose sides or join a hostile military coalition against your neighbors. Instead, we will purchase your oil, construct your modern highways, and develop your ports. We will inject massive capital into your domestic economies, and we will diplomatically manage your regional security concerns so you don't have to rely on military conflict to feel safe. Most importantly, Beijing promised to deliver all of this without demanding that the Gulf states cut ties with Iran, because China already maintains a lucrative friendship with Tehran and can successfully navigate both relationships. This diplomatic proposition vastly outshined anything Washington brought to the table, and the Gulf nations eagerly accepted it. Today, Saudi Arabia exports more of its oil to China than to any other nation on earth. The United Arab Emirates has transformed into a primary financial conduit for Chinese capital, effectively circumventing Western economic punishments. Even Qatar, the nation hosting the largest American military airbase in the entire Middle East, is rapidly expanding its deep energy partnerships with Beijing. We cannot dismiss these nations as traitors. They are highly rational actors practicing intelligent geopolitical hedging. But the undeniable consequence of this massive hedging strategy is that the entire strategic map of the Persian Gulf is methodically and irreversibly shifting toward Chinese control. The most terrifying aspect is that the political leadership in Washington either completely misses this tectonic shift or is utterly paralyzed on how to combat it. The weapons they continually deploy, economic tariffs, technological embargoes, and isolated financial pressure, are antiquated tools designed for a narrow trade dispute, not a comprehensive struggle for global geopolitical dominance. You simply cannot slap a tariff on the Strait of Hormuz to gain control over it. You cannot secure maritime dominance by parking a massive cargo ship full of microchips in the middle of the Gulf of Oman. The real conflict is a battle for enduring alliances, physical infrastructure dominance, and the unwavering loyalty of regional power brokers. And in this crucial arena, the United States is suffering a catastrophic defeat. The timing of these events elevates this from a setback to a profound crisis. The structural decisions being finalized right now, the massive port leases, the multi-decade energy contracts, the deeply embedded political networks, are fundamentally permanent. These are not superficial policies that the next American president or the administration following them can simply reverse. Physical infrastructure remains operational for decades. Once these profound strategic partnerships are forged, they create deeply rooted needs and dependencies that are extraordinarily difficult to shatter. Beijing is not strategizing to win the next election cycle. They are playing a generational game. For the very first time, China is aggressively and methodically playing to conquer the Persian Gulf. The American public has been deliberately misdirected, told to obsess over fluctuating tariff numbers, the national trade deficit, and semiconductor embargoes. While those factors hold some economic relevance, they are absolutely not the primary battlefield. The real war for the future of global power is silently unfolding in the Persian Gulf, where the fundamental architecture of international energy flow and geopolitical dominance is being quietly, methodically, and carefully rewritten. The most critical 21 miles of navigable water on the planet are steadily slipping from American hands and falling directly into the Chinese sphere of influence. When the dust finally settles and the noise fades, we are going to be forced to ask ourselves a brutal question. How exactly did we willingly surrender the absolute keys to the world while we were busy arguing over computer chips?